So everyone can see my screen. We'll get started here. I am English, so we like to get started on time. I'm sure the people that have acclimatized to Costa Rica will arrive a little bit later, as typical. But thanks very much, everyone, for joining us for the first Costa Rica investment and real estate webinar, our inaugural one. I've never done one before, but a lot of people have been asking me to do it. So here we are, and we have the pleasure today of having basically myself, as you guys know, from Costa Rica Investments. Some of you guys have probably worked with us before or followed some of our LinkedIn stuff. And also Paola Retana, who's a partner and lawyer here at Legal She, focusing on real estate and development here. You want to say hello to the team or everyone there, Paola?
Hello, hi, it's a pleasure to be here talking about investing in Costa Rica. Always excited to join Richard in these endeavors. And I hope we are able to address any questions that you may have, which I'm sure are going to be a lot by the end of the presentation.
Fantastic. Well, again, guys, there'll be two kind of parts here to this talk that we'll do today. I'm going to focus kind of more on Costa Rica and investment data, and then Paola will basically focus more on kind of the investment landscape and legal structures here when investing and buying property here in Costa Rica. So again, today, I'll just quickly go over the agenda here so you guys know what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about country data, so kind of more Costa Rica arrival data, and also where that data is coming from, the growth in that data. Then I'm going to zoom in on locations in Costa Rica, all over Costa Rica based on that data. Then I'm going to combine that with a little bit of search data that we get on Google keyword search terms there, guys. So that we're looking at kind of, again, vacation rental kind of data, arrival data in the country, and then also search data from Google there as well. I always like to take a look at search data as it's always indicative of kind of where the demand is, or the intent of the demand, and the location kind of is when it happens. And also just some opportunities that I can see looking at this data for any budding investors out there. Then we'll jump over to Paola, and she'll talk to about how to invest in Costa Rica, kind of legal ownership and also considerations. And then we'll take some questions at the end. And there are some breaks within this because, again, country data, location data. So I think if anyone has questions and wants to kind of type them away, feel free to, and we'll take a kind of little bit of a break. My section will probably take, I'd probably say about 20 minutes. Paola, I think your section will probably take about 15 minutes.
Yes, sorry, but yeah. So about 15 minutes.
It's from my section, there's gonna be a lot of data, guys. So we'll share all of this afterwards as well. So don't worry if it's like overwhelming some of the data. I try to simplify it as much as possible. But for some people, this data is going to be like, well, duh, Richard. And then other people will be like, wow, I never really even knew that. But I'll share the slide deck that we have after this as well, so that anybody that wants to take a further look at it with a little bit of time over coffee and kind of digest it can do. Okay, so let's get started here. I mean, at a macro level, Costa Rica's brand, I think everyone's aware of the Happy Planet Index here. It's been ranked as one of the happiest places in the world, from 2016 to 2019, and then also in 2022 as well. So Costa Rica is a happy place. I think you guys know that. I believe Costa Rica's number one asset, of course, is its people. And I think for anyone that lives here in Costa Rica definitely understands that. We also have Brand Finance. Basically, Brand Finance is a company that measures brand strength. Costa Rica has been one of the top 20 fastest growing brands globally, guys. We also have National Geographic. In 2023, Costa Rica was voted the best Latin American destination. And International Living, for a lot of you guys that are aware, 2024 is the best place to retire as Costa Rica. Maybe not the cheapest, but definitely, I agree, one of the best places to retire. So at a macro level, that's kind of just some of the stuff that's going on with the brand. When we look at investment data here, guys, this is pretty interesting. It's basically from global data, came out at the end of 2022, 2023. This looks at, for every dollar of GDP, what was the investment dollar received? And as you can see there, and this is the whole world, guys, like this is not just, small up and coming countries. This is the whole world. So Costa Rica basically received, for every dollar of GDP, $13.4 of investment, punching well above its weight. As you can see there, I mean, we have, countries like the United Arab Emirates, we have Croatia here, Singapore, which are countries that have been established for many, many years. A lot of that investment, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, is coming from tech, from businesses and also professional services, but also real estate and tourism as well. But I think that was the big thing that's recently come out, is just Costa Rica really punching above its weight when it comes to foreign direct investment here. And I'm sure a lot of you are seeing that here as well. And also when it comes to the brand of Costa Rica, just hearing more and more about it. I mean, it's been in The Simpsons, for God's sake. So it's a matter of time before it becomes a huge destination. So, as I mentioned there, Costa Rica is a strong brand. The Bloom basically consulting looked at, for the Americas, kind of just its brand strength here. Costa Rica comes in 4th place, guys, which as a brand behind United States, Mexico, and Canada, I mean, there's some pretty strong brands there, those top 3, and even above Brazil. Last year it was in 5th place. This year it's in 4th, and continues to just kind of really just grow. And as a world rank, 31 of all countries in the world as a country as its brand, guys. So I think we'll kind of consider to see that happen as we go forwards here in Costa Rica. So, just Costa Rica just seems to be going from leaps to bounds and getting stronger and stronger. So I always like to say Costa Rica kind of has a bit of a natural filter on investments and also its branding as well, of everything's so difficult to do here that only the good ideas get through. But that might not always be the case, but we'll see. So now kind of switching gears now into kind of, we've looked at Costa Rica as a brand, its tourism, its investment data, and kind of its brand ranking of just really looking at Costa Rica's country tourism here, guys. So I'm going to be looking here at Q1 arrivals, basically from 2019 to 2024. Why? Just so I can compare apples to apples here, so that we can take a look at Q1 being January, February, and March, which is the biggest arrivals time in this country. So here just gives you an idea. This is all arrivals into Costa Rica, guys. And 2019, we were at basically 870,000. We saw a dip in 2020, of course, because again, everybody's aware, and 2021. Then we started to see a kind of 2022, a gradual increase with near par, arrivals there in 2023. So we're kind of reaching, I would say, pre-pandemic levels back in 2023. And of course, 2024, setting a new record here with over 11% growth over 2019. And I mean, it's pretty astonishing that, some destinations haven't even come back, to their post-pandemic numbers, and Costa Rica continues to. I personally believe that, Costa Rica will break all records in 2024. We are seeing some return to seasonality that, like we had seen pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, even our low season was kind of somewhat not low anymore. It was kind of more of a mid-season. And I think we'll see a little bit of a return to that. But Costa Rica is just so much in the forefront of people's minds at the moment. I know that 2024 is probably going to be the best, year on record. When we look at country arrival data of just seeing where some of that growth is coming from in Q1, this is just the top 10 here, guys. Everything highlighted in green is kind of growth. Everything in, I suppose the orange is growth as well, but just not as big. And everything in red is kind of decline. I wouldn't focus too much on the percentages. I always used to say to salespeople, don't get confused by the percentages, because that doesn't put food on the table. The numbers do. So when looking at number growth here, you can just see the US just outstrips everything here, guys. It's bigger than all the others kind of put together. A 24% growth from 2019 to 2024 in Q1. In Canada, good growth there at 12%. But when you start looking at the numbers, guys, it really is pretty small comparative to the US. And I can't see that really changing much, just because of the flights that we get in from the US, and just the demand for vacations during certain times of year. It's nice to see Europe growing. Again, we have flights from many locations in Europe. I'm not too sure whether we'll get any new destinations. We might just get a new volume of flights coming in. So instead of it being, 2 or 3 times a week, we'll start to get it maybe 4 or 5 times a week as that demand kind of happens there. Now I'm going to, we've looked at Costa Rica's arrival data. We've looked at where it's coming from. Now I'm going to look at airport arrival data as well here. I want to put this in perspective that when I started in tourism in 2005, the split between San Jose and Liberia was 80-20. So 80% arriving into San Jose, 20% into Liberia. This is what that looked like in 2019, guys, for Q1. So a 72-28 split there between San Jose and Liberia. As we continue through this and we take a look at 2024, you can see the split here now is 64-36 here. Okay, that's a huge movement there, guys. And I expect the Liberia airport to continue to increase with arrivals because that airport can expand though as well. Whereas the San Jose airport really doesn't have much further room to expand. If anyone's flown in, you can see that it's kind of has development all around it. So I'm not too sure where they would extend, build another runway, or add, they could potentially maybe add a terminal or two. But I mean, it's pretty busy at the moment. So, I mean, just the growth there in Liberia of 46% is pretty outstanding. And I think we'll continue to see that. I mean, San Jose is probably going to continue to, teeter along, but not much, but we're going to see the majority of the growth coming into Liberia. I actually wanted to see if I could get any private flight data, and not Taylor Swift's private flight data to Costa Rica, but like private flight data here. And unfortunately, again, private flight data, so I wasn't able to get it that easy. But I'm going to have one of the analysts in our office just take a look at like how many private airplanes and flights are coming into Costa Rica. I know every single time I fly in there, they're just lined up on the runway, more in Liberia than they are in San Jose. So, overall kind of flight, arrival data continues to increase, guys. Costa Rica has a goal by 2030 to get to 5 million travelers. I think that's nuts, to be honest with you. I don't think they're going to get there. I mean, I think for, shooting for the stars and landing on the moon sometimes, I think it's very ambitious. I don't think, we even have the infrastructure in place to manage 5 million tourists, especially over the next 5 to 6 years. I mean, we all know how slow things move in this country, which is the beauty of it. So I don't think getting to 5 million is going to be, an easy task. I think we're going to see more between the $3.5 to $4 million number, guys. 4 million number of tourists, but from the 3.5 to 4 million tourists. And, my big question is where are they going to stay? And the reason I say that is, hotels aren't being built quick enough, guys. I mean, you can name on your hands hotels that have been built, like larger hotels in the past 5 years and even in the past 3 years. I mean, permitting is just time consuming in Costa Rica. I mean, it can take a minimum of 3 years just to break ground. And then from then you could be another 2 years of construction, 3 years of construction. So you could be looking at 5 years even before that you start getting a return. And when you kind of put that together with other destinations, kind of with the cost of operating here, and looking at other destinations such as Mexico, the Dominican Republic, also Puerto Rico, like those numbers make more sense sometimes there. Whether that's the case long term, I don't know, but I think that the colon, the exchange rate at the moment is not helping things for many investors coming to Costa Rica. So that's where I'm starting to see is kind of a move towards more vacation rentals because, they much easier to build, much easier to develop, and you don't need the water resources that you need for a hotel on that one as well. So, I bring the question up there, but that's really kind of the move that I'm starting to see here of like vacation rentals operating as hotels. I know because we're building some of them, and I know because we're also helping some property management companies that are also managing them as well. Any questions, guys, from the audience there on any of this data before I start getting into the location data? I'll just wait 10 seconds here. Actually, I think we've got one QA, right?
Yeah, we have one in there, Rich.
So what is the rough breakout of where these folks are visiting in Costa Rica, Pacific Coast, Atlantic Coast, cities, and volcanoes? Great question, Chris. I don't have the answer for that. The one thing that I do know is that when in the travel company, we had 70% of travelers visiting Arenal and Monteverde and then going to the beach. That split between the Pacific and the Atlantic, I don't have, or also the cities. But what I typically would use for that is just, the number of listings of vacation rentals in those areas can be used. I'm just not too sure whether that data is actually captured as well. So, but yeah, I hope that answers your question there, Chris. If I don't know the answer, I always say to people I don't know. And in this case, I don't know. But what you could do, I mean, just to give you an idea, was maybe look at vacation rentals on the Pacific Coast compared to these central areas, and then also on the Caribbean side. But I think it's going to be far outstripped, probably like 80% going towards the Pacific Coast. But those people also combining it with the volcanoes and mountain area as well. So it says here, describe how vacation rental operates like a hotel. Where's the line between operations? Well, I mean, it operates as a hotel from the aspect of having concierge, including breakfast, those kind of things. Maybe not 24-hour, front desk, but there is always someone there. And and not having, you know, kind of a fully functioning restaurant, usually more private chefs. So it's kind of just more of those light services, including breakfast, because who wants to make breakfast on vacation? If you want lunch and dinner, having chef services and just having a concierge there. A lot of homes now that we're working with on the higher end are also having house mums as well. So I hope that that answers that one, Eduardo. The more development, the higher prices for locals. Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with that one, Michael. You know, the other option to that is it's also providing work for people as well. I mean, you know, people that work in these industries and also tourist industries are collecting 10% of the service. You know, I'm assuming here that their boss is a responsible individual and passing that 10% service on to the individuals. So yeah, I mean, higher the prices, but also I think the opportunities as well. I think I can say that I've never seen Costa Ricans do so well. Michael, I think, you know, this is my perspective, of course, but it's, you know, as they say here, hay plata en el calle. There's money in the street. You just need to know how to pick it up. And a lot of the businesses, tours, transport companies, and even hotel owners are from Costa Rica as well. So we had here, just to be clear, you believe Costa Rica tourists can increase from 960,000 to 357 by 20. No, the 967 was just for Q1 there, Dave. So really it's going from like 2.47 million, I think it was in 2023, basically all the way up, you know, to Costa Rica saying 5 million. I mean, going from last year's 2.47 million tourists to 5 million is a bit of a jump. I think we're going to be closer to the 3.5, maybe 4 million. So are you talking about multi-unit buildings or several freestanding buildings? More, I would say several freestanding buildings, but just because, again, there aren't that many multi-unit kind of buildings on that front. Is it difficult to find high-quality property management, Steve? Yes, at times it is. You just need to know who basically to really use in that one. And we're more than happy to kind of give you some direction on that, because we have quite a few of them we know, friends that own them, and also clients that have used them and have had good experiences, others that have had bad. Daniel, it says here, are there any signs of municipalities getting more efficient or trying to provide better infrastructure to tourism, water, for example? I mean, I'd kind of say tongue in cheek there, Danny, of like, not really. I mean, I think that a lot of people need to understand here is that a lot of this infrastructure work, the development has to happen before the infrastructure work comes in. These municipalities are not sitting on tons of money. They get this money from taxes. You know, property taxes are 0.25% in Costa Rica. You know, we also have luxury home tax as well. A lot of people don't even file for that. The municipalities are not even looking at it either, and going around and looking at homes. So there's a lot of work that can be done there. For water, Daniel, gets a little bit more complicated because of SADAs, which are locally run water associations compared to at the government level, and just the infrastructure required and the money that they have. These SADAs don't have the money, so they have to wait for big developers to come in, basically, or smaller developers to pay for that infrastructure work. So, I mean, we've seen a little bit of increased efficiencies, but I wouldn't say that it's been a major change there. Josh says here, where do you see development moving, urban sprawl, in the next 2 years? I'm going to answer that in a minute, Josh. And that's a great segue into Costa Rica location rental data there, guys. Sorry, that was a lot of questions and a lot of responses in a short period of time. So overall rental listings kind of growth here in Costa Rica, guys. So what we're looking at here basically is just the number of listings on Airbnb, okay? We get a lot of our data from AirDNA, but we have to go in and clean a lot of it. It's so dirty, guys, it's unbelievable. So we have to go in, download it, run a bunch of macros to actually clean that data up, tons of replicas, etc., just so that you're aware of what we get here. And we have access to every vacation rental in Costa Rica. A little bit different than maybe some of you guys view on AirDNA. We actually have the back end of it there. But I think what you're seeing here, guys, is just an exponential growth in the number of listings in Costa Rica. You know, 2023 saw growth of 27% there. You know, 2024, so far, guys, this is so far, has seen a 22% increase. So I think we're going to continue to see probably around a 30% increase here this year. And this is definitely going to slow down as we start to see markets cool down, which we're starting to see here, guys. You know, I've never seen so many price reductions. I think a lot of those price reductions were people that were maybe just drunk and throwing prices and seeing, you know, what was hitting on the wall there. But also the cost of construction is increasing as well, guys. I mean, you know, 2 years ago, we had an exchange rate of 680, nearly 700. Today, you know, it's 500, sub 500. So, you know, when you project that out, that's a 30% increase in the cost of construction here. We're building all over Costa Rica. What I've started to do, guys, it is actually more affordable sometimes to buy stuff abroad and import it and pay the taxes than it is to buy things here. So anytime that we've been able to do that in dollars, we've just been doing that, so that we just don't have that currency risk there in any of our projects. Like for steel, we'll buy directly from Guatemala and import it rather than paying for it, you know, in colones. So we have that. That's the overall kind of rental listings growth here in Costa Rica that you've seen. When we start to see that listings growth by locations, this is a lot of data, guys. And remember that I'll share this with you. I basically here have really ordered this by growth, which is, I suppose, the fourth column here. San Jose seeing a lot of growth, but a lot of that's coming from the towers. If any of you have seen the skyline of San Jose, you'd have seen that change basically over the past couple of years. We also see here Puerto Viejo, Cahuita seeing huge change there as well. And you'll see even more data later on for Puerto Viejo and Cahuita, and a case to be made for investment there as well. Jaco, towers, guys, again, anywhere that they're able to build towers and condominiums is just going to grow much quicker because they can add 150, 250 rooms by clicking their fingers by putting that tower up, rather than having to build kind of more, you know, more organic developments or, I suppose, horizontal condominiums rather than vertical condominiums, as we call them here. But I think that there's some potential, guys, in areas here. So I want you to take a look at the bottom section here of looking at, you know, Junquial, Negra, La Fortuna, Samara, Monteverde. Chichagua is by Arenal, just like Said Arenal for anyone. But just looking at those areas, not as a percentage growth, but also as their numbers growth, because I think you're going to see here is that some of those lower end where we haven't seen as much growth in numbers, maybe percent, but not in numbers, are going to come up when we start looking at the location data. So now I'm going to look here, guys, at locations as we did before with listings growth in locations, but this is occupancy in locations. Okay, guys, this is for really condos and villas only, just so that you're aware. Interesting thing here is you'd expect Mamon Antonio, you'd expect Nosada. I don't think tons of people would have expected Monteverde. I don't think, you know, you'd have expected Tamarindo. I don't know whether you would have expected Sama there, guys. You know, Santa Teresa, Malpais, Grande, of course. San Jose is doing well. La Fortuna, great. Chichagua, which is right there as well. Just there are a few things coming up there. So there's going to be a tendency, or there's going to be a trend here, which you guys are going to start to see here. You know, we've seen Monteverde and Arenal and Samara in these other listing locations. We've seen it here now in occupancy. But when we now move to average daily rates in these areas, you won't see them. Okay. And, you know, I'll get to that a little bit of why I think that's happening. But when you look at average daily rates here, I mean, Papagayo, as you guys know, which is basically the Four Seasons, is like, yeah, we all know that. But its occupancy is not that high either. I think it's in the 40s. You know, the 40%, but it's up here in the 2,425. Nosada, of course, Las Catalinas, Potrero, Tamarindo, Grande, and Jaco. Jaco is bought up by basically Los Sueños guys there, the luxury homes that are there. There are some luxury beachfront homes in Jaco as well, not huge amounts of them. But I think this data kind of just, you were like, yeah, I mean, this makes sense. This kind of, you know, is pretty intuitive. Yeah, we'd agree with that. You know, what you need to now kind of take a look at when looking at this data is just the cost to enter these areas. Usually when it's high ADR, the real estate costs are high. Papagayo, just a lot is, you know, $2 million. Nosada, $1 million for a lot. Las Catalinas, you know, I mean, $1 million homes there. Tamarindo, there is still some opportunity in Tamarindo, and I'll get to that later, guys. As there is, I still think in Grande, you know, Flamingo basically saw a lot of, you know, speculation on that area. But it's just the higher the ADR, of course, the more expensive the real estate because the market is more mature. What I'm always looking for are those markets that aren't so mature and that are up and coming. And that's where we kind of put all this data together, you know, sometimes. And what we're looking at here is taking occupancy and the average daily rate and multiplying them together just to see is, you know, kind of how it shakes out there and if there is any movement. And really, there's not much difference there. Jaco, of course, dropped, guys, because its occupancy is a little bit lower. Its ADR was higher. But Papagayo continues to do really well. Nosada as well. Las Catalinas, Tamarindo, Flamingo, Mamon Antonio, which are the core destinations there. So, you know, these are very mature destinations. But then you can start to look at some of the lower stuff, the up and coming stuff. Puerto Carrillo, which is near Samara, guys, Portalón, Matapalo, which is between Dominicao and Manuel Antonio. And also, I mean, you've got Punta Leona there, but I think that's more of a local market. And then also Junquial and also Negra there. I think that the data should be able to give you a bit of a direction, but I also think that like you need to use your intuition a little bit. Difficult for some people to do when they're not here in Costa Rica, or they don't understand the market or the whole country. You might understand one market, but you don't understand how that market basically has perspective against other markets here in Costa Rica. And that's kind of really what we do is, you know, we take a look at this data and we're able to put perspective, you know, on certain markets here. So now, you know, I'd mentioned that we'd look at location data from an Airbnb VRBO point of view. Now I want to take a look at search data, which I like to look at, which is, again, Google search data, which is kind of more intent. Like it's people searching stuff online on Google, basically. What we did was we looked at search terms over the last 12 months in Costa Rica and kind of grouped them together, okay, by location, okay? So, and there's some big shockers in this one. And again, you're going to start to see multiple locations repeating themselves on this. So these are the average search terms per month. The column on the left, basically, I wasn't long enough to put it together, so I kind of split it up into two. But look how Arenal is outstripping Tamarindo here on search terms, guys. And that's stuff like Arenal hotels, just the term Arenal, La Fortuna tours, you know, vacation rentals, everything. It's just way outstripping Tamarindo and also Monteverde there, guys. Like I was not expecting Arenal and Monteverde to be in the top 5. I really wasn't. I wasn't expecting Samara to be in the top 10 and definitely not Rio Celeste either as well, guys. You know, so it's just interesting when you look at this data because you need to take this data. This is kind of more intent. This is more like tourism intent. Whereas the vacation rental data is kind of people have stayed there, you know, it's kind of maturing destination. So what I'm saying here is you kind of need to start to put stuff together here. And like, as I like to call it, kind of the investment magic. So, you know, this is where magic happens in Costa Rica, in my opinion, guys. And this is what we look at. It's in high demand areas where, you know, there's good rental data. Potentially there's good search data. You know, and also we always look at tourism in the hotels, the mid to luxury hotel section. Why? Because really is destinations don't happen until really there's hotels there. Why? Because they bring the tourists in or the investors in for places to stay. People like it. They get a feeling. There's a sense of community. And then from there, the real estate kind of builds out. And you can take a look at whether you want to look at Las Catalinas, whether you want to look at the Four Seasons, whether you want to look at Reserva Conchal, Penilla, Los Sueños, etc. Even Tulamar in Manuel Antonio. Like these were tourist destinations with hotels that brought people in and that drove up the price of that real estate. So I'm always looking at mid to luxury hotels in certain areas as it's my belief that tourism dictates where real estate and investment value is, guys. And then also cross-relate that with where real estate is affordable. Take Nosara. It has great rental data. It has good search data. It has mid to luxury hotels probably, and its real estate, unfortunately, is just not affordable. You can get into that market, but that market is a mature market, guys. So where do I think some magic's happening at the moment, guys, based on just some of the data that we've got and also, you know, my gut. You know, I don't always shoot from the hip, even though sometimes it may appear, but I like La Fortuna Arenal. Why? High search data, guys, online, meaning the intent is there. It's got affordable real estate and there's a lot of land around there. And there are high-end hotels there. There are hotels there getting just as good, like nightly rates as there are at the beach, if not better, and better occupancy than at the beach in the La Fortuna area. Also, another one, Monteverde, as you guys saw there, it's high search data again. It has affordable real estate. Doesn't have luxury hotels, but has mid-level hotels. I mean, we've seen Monteverde Lodge, we've seen Senda come in this year there and just upgrade, and they continue to upgrade. I mean, I'm speaking to Hans, who manages Senda the other day, and it's been incredible, the rise of their average daily rates there. And also Monteverde just has great occupancy as well. Another one, which is a bit of a dirt, is Tamarindo. It has high search data, guys. I believe the value in Tamarindo is finding affordable land or older homes and remodeling rather than buying something that's existing so that you're not paying pure market value. It has mid to higher end hotels there, guys, and just great occupancy as well. Another one, Puerto Viejo Cahuita. I personally am not a huge fan of it from an investment point of view. I love going to it. I'm sure a case can be made for it. It has high search data. There is affordable real estate. There are mid-level hotels, lower to mid-level hotels. It's not quite there. The solid occupancy. I'm always going, how does it connect with a trip to Costa Rica? And there is a way to do it, but it's just not easy. It's not easy to connect. I do love it from a point of view of great food, great vibes. It's just not in my I would say investment sphere at this particular moment in time. And finally, Samara keeps coming up as well, guys, as you've seen on all here. That's high search data. It's got a quite affordable real estate. There aren't that many, I would say, even mid-level hotels in that area. So you just need to kind of bear that in mind. Carrillo, the beach over, I think has Nambu, I think it's called, which are the owners of El Establo, but it just has good occupancy and people seem to enjoy going there. So this is just kind of 5 of areas based on the data and kind of just, I would say, my gut that I like for investment. And here are just 2 examples, guys. On the left, 567 square meter bit of land in Arenal with volcano view, with water, in kind of a very small development that you could buy for $65,000. You could put a home on it, prefab home, build a home, and based on our numbers, you could get a return of 15% on top of that. The other one on the right here is actually in Langosta, in Punta San Francisco, which is a high-end development with multi-million-dollar beachfront homes there. We did the numbers here on a 5-bedroom home, a total investment of 1.3 million. Homes in that area are selling at 1.8. And it's your choice what you do. You can rent it and get an annual return of 14%, or if you wanted to, you could sell it and make basically a close to 30% return on that. And these are just 2 guys that we go through whenever we're doing analysis of investments kind of here in Costa Rica. We're always looking for stuff, and we actually do the investments ourselves, meaning that we make we make the pudding, that we also dictate our clients and investors to basically make their investments. We also do investments here in Costa Rica as well. So, okay, there is one more slide, but before that, I'm going to get to the Q&A here because we've got some questions. Those are poor occupancy returns, said Michael. I think it just depends. You have to look at occupancy versus the average daily rate there. So it's really, you have to kind of combine all those things together and find comps and do analysis. So it's not easy to do. And that's why, we do what it is that we do. Johnny says there, you've mentioned in your past, the podcast, the experiences rental market being the most lucrative in vacation rental market. Can you provide any comparison to cap expenditures versus a traditional multi-unit rental? Multi-unit rentals, I mean, that's a good question. I think I'd need to explore that a little bit more on that one, Johnny, to give you an idea. The multi-unit rentals, the advantage of it is that it's kind of a sunk cost when you buy land, meaning that you could put 4 to 6 apartments on there compared to a luxury home. I think it's just then, I always looking at it from an exit and resale point of view, meaning that like, if I buy a piece of land and I build 6 apartments on there, unless I'm going to go to condo law, the next guy needs to want to have 6 apartments. Whereas as a vacation home, I can sell just the one vacation home rather than buying 6 apartments. And I think Costa Rica is more of a lifestyle investment, which a vacation home is, rather than 6 apartments, which is kind of more of like a ones and zeros investment here. But I think what you'd find is the cap rates, probably on apartments can do very well. They can do just as well as vacation homes, guys, as well. Sometimes even better. It just depends, again, on location, how much you pay for the land, and also construction costs there as well. Again, good question there from Johnny. Unfortunately, Johnny, I don't have the data at hand there, but nothing more than our analysts like than to analyze data. So President candidate Figueres talked about making Costa Rica into the new Singapore. I don't see that. I mean, I really don't. Costa Rica, unfortunately, is a high tax authority, guys, unlike Singapore, which kind of has an offshore it's offshore, basically. Costa Rica, unfortunately, from a tax perspective, is not one of the most beneficial, I would say, countries to do business in. But I think that probably died with his candidacy, unfortunately, there, Max. Michael here says Monteverde has minimal infrastructure. It does, but it also has an asphalt road. A lot of people are going to it as well. And it's also maybe an easier drive from Guanacaste than also driving to Arenal as well. And I think we're starting to see that, but also Arenal is getting busy. So I think a lot of that is, flooding over to Monteverde. Hey, when you invest in Costa Rica, would you set up a company or how does that work? Camille, good question. I'm going to let Paola basically answer that one because that kind of goes over to her part of the project. Mario Jose, how about investment opportunity in Dominical, Hochau, Uvita? Yeah, definitely Uvita came up on it. Dominical has good returns as well. Dominical, I think, is just because there's not tons available in that area. I think there's one group that owns the majority of the beachfront land and all the way up the mountain there. I know because they've offered to me multiple different times. Ohachow is more residential. I think there is opportunity in Ohachow, guys, for something that is a little bit more luxurious for sure. Again, just need to take a look, at the data there. I managed vacation rentals in Utah, Hawaii for 18 years. Do you know any for sale where I could add value? Yeah, definitely, Max. If you want to, afterwards, you can get in contact with us. We'll send an email. We know quite a few, I would say, vacation rentals here. I actually had a friend who owned one of Hawaii's largest vacation rentals there, Jeff, for many, many years and sold it to I think, a home away competitor. Dave says here, are you referring to apartment buildings for long-term, i.e. annual rentals to locals? Or are you referring to apartment units rented to tourists? I think really your returns are going to be more towards tourists, of course, Dave. I think that there is an opportunity for locals. I've always thought about buying something on the exterior areas, instead of being in Santa Teresa, being up in Covino area, or over in Cabuya, instead of being in Tamarindo, being out in Villa Real. There is a demand for that for locals long-term and also for expats long-term as well. But I was referring it to more towards tourists. But again, tourists are going to want more key areas, whereas I think locals and more annual rentals are going to want more kind of a little bit further out than the tourist town. If anyone's tried to get into Tamarindo during a busy period of year, you'll definitely know what I'm on about. Do good surf destinations get better ADR and higher occupancy? Daniel Hernandez, in typical, yes. I mean, if you look at all the main locations, usually they are surf destinations, Santa Teresa, Nosara, Tamarindo for sure. Michael says also possibly interested in purchasing vacation rentals. Great, we'll send a follow-up email there. I know we've got a couple of other questions there, guys. I'm just going to wait there. Again, I will see some of these questions here, answer them at the end, just so that I don't take up all the time here and that we also give a break here to Paola.
Perfect.
Paola, did you want to present this or did you want me to click?
Well, if you want to click so we don't change it, I'll be fine with that if you're okay.
Oh, sure. Last thing before I let you go, Paola, this was actually a global property guide here. I'll share this over, guys. Basically, they analyzed 300 properties in Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And here are the countries with the highest net rental yields. I'm sure you'd be very interested to see this, guys, and we will share it after in the presentation as well. Just don't want to take up huge amounts of time. But in summary, Costa Rica is there 4 times in the top 10, guys, just so that you're aware of rental properties, okay? Cool. I will do my best to click, Paola.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to answer Camille's question shortly, but before getting into is it better to invest in a corporation or under a personal name, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how can you own property in Costa Rica or what type of properties we have in Costa Rica. So in general terms speaking, we have 2 types of properties, fee simple properties, which refer to title land. Basically, this is the type of property that the most common type of property. It's similar to what is used in other countries, with a positive particularity that we have a public registry. This is important because all title lands are registered in a public registry, and any transactions that you do in a title land are recorded in a public registry. So anytime an asset is transferred, mortgaged, or in any way, encumbered, it is recorded in the public registry and is available in a property title. Basically subject to any conditions, imposed by law or any restrictions that are created directly in the property title. Holding this type of property gives owners the ability or absolute rights to own, to transfer, to lease, to modify, to develop. The other type of properties that we have are concessions, which is basically beachfront properties. These are not considered fee simple properties. This is kind of like a lease from the Costa Rican government, which are awarded by municipalities and local entities like the Costa Rican Tourism Board. This is what we know as maritime zone land. So beachfront properties are divided into 2 portions. The first 50 meters are public. They're accessible to anybody and they cannot be owned. by private individuals. And these are the first 50 meters counting from the high tide, right? So the first 50 meters are public. After that, the next 150 meters, so in order to own or purchase property that is beachfront after the 50 meters, they're what we call concession lands. This is basically what we know as a lease, right? So it's not owning, it's leasing, but you have the ability to develop subject to certain regulations. With, basically, except for this special regime of concessions, foreign citizens do not have any restrictions to own or hold property in Costa Rica. So they have the same rights as local citizens to own it or not. So being a foreign citizen is not an impossibility to own land. So it's not a requirement to hold a corporation. Any citizen of any country can own a property here in Costa Rica. So the question about either is it a good idea to incorporate or to hold property under your personal name is basically a question of when, how, and what do you want to do with your property, right? I think this is one of the biggest questions that we have every time somebody wants to, and I know we had it in the chat by Camille, but this is one of the biggest questions we always have when we're discussing a property purchase or acquisitions here in Costa Rica, right? And the answer is not straightforward. It always has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. I put some examples here, and I think we can click them all, Richard, if you want. But basically, and maybe to give you a little bit of background here, traditionally, before, we used to have a corporation. People used to have the habit, I would say, to create a corporation for anything. So if you had a car, I would own it in a corporation. If you had 5 properties, you would have an individual corporation for each property. Now, increasing, compliance requirements regarding incorporation of corporations, recent taxes that have been applied to corporations has made this decision, not very habitual now. And since there are no restrictions to own land as a foreign citizen, you don't have to do a corporation. So I think the question here is basically, are you going to be living in Costa Rica? Holding a property in your personal name is an easy way to prove that you have an investor here and access to the possibility of having an investment visa. Also, if you're not living here, having a corporation may facilitate the day-to-day management of your investment. That this is also important for closing proceedings. If you're not going to be here, having a corporation might facilitate all of the closing, the purchase, everything that you need to do in order to actually own the property and title it to the name of your corporation or of your investment. I think privacy is also one of the considerations that some of our clients take into account. Since we have a public registry, anything that is, anybody that owns a property, you are able to do a search in the public registry. I can search Richard Bexon to see he has a property in Costa Rica and it will show up. So privacy is a big thing for some people, not for everybody. And this is why this is always on a case-by-case basis, right? Corporations are, and I will explain that in the next slides, but corporations, you don't know who the owners are. You know who the representatives are, but you don't know who the corporation are. So if privacy is important, I think this is one of the considerations. And then one of the biggest considerations in legal terms is separation of liability, right? Basically, if you have or own asset or investment in a property, it's going to be separated from your personal assets. So it depends on what you want to do. I will say, as a general rule, in order to consider if you want to have a corporation or hold a property under your personal name, think about, are you living in Costa Rica, or will you be handling all of your affairs personally? Will you own several properties that will require you to separate liabilities? And I think also how important it is to keep your ownership private as well. So the question after that, after you make the decision of either to hold property under your personal name or under a corporation, is what type of company, right? In Costa Rica, we have 2 common types of companies, which is basically anonymous corporations or SAs and limited liability companies. SAs are a little bit more complicated, but the differences are very slight. Both companies offer its partners the benefit of limited liability and private, right? They're not public, the owners are not made public. Both companies must be incorporated by at least 2 partners, but later you can change and only one person can be the owner of each. Both companies are allowed to create branches, both companies are allowed to hold properties. And then the differences are the corporation or the SA is governed by a board of directors, which requires at least 3 members. And it also requires a controller. So you need at least 4 people to be sitting in the operation of the corporation, right? Limited liability companies only require 1 manager. You can have more than 1, but 1 is the minimum. And then I would say the biggest difference between these two is the participation of their partners. So corporations, the participation of partners in corporations are represented by stock, which are considered to be securities, and you may transfer them by endorsement. You may also have different types of partners. So you can have, the regular partnership or special partners, depending on if they're going to contribute only in certain issues. So it's a little bit, I would say this is for different, for transactions that require some level of sophistication. In cases of limited liability companies, partnerships are represented by shares, which are transferred only by endorsement. So, and you must give your partners a right of first refusal. So this is more like for personal, for holding like personal investments, I would say. At the end of the day, the decision to choose a legal structure will depend on the size of your business, the number of partners you have, and the level of involvement you want in each, and the complexity of your management needs. One thing that I want to mention, 2 things that I think are important in these considerations. One is that you can always change. So if you start with setting up a business in Costa Rica with a limited liability company because you thought you were going to do something small, and then eventually your business starts growing and you want to incorporate additional partners, or you want to include more, compliance corporate structures, you can always change from one to another. So at the end of the day, this is an important decision to be made, and it's important to be advised well since the beginning, but it's not fixed. It's not like you have to dissolve the corporation if your business grows, which I think is something important. And then the other important point that I wanted to mention is both companies are equally subject to taxation. So there's no difference in taxation depending on the structure of the corporation that you choose. The difference in the taxation comes from the economic activity itself, but not from the form of a corporation. However, there's a point that I also want to make here, which is something that we do consider every time that we're dealing with foreign investors, particularly for US citizens. We have a lot of clients that are from the United States. Choosing one or the other does have implications in the US. So we always like to work with, our clients, accountants, local accountants, to determine what is the best structure or the best corporation that they need, the best company that they need. Most US citizens usually opt for a SRL, which is a limited liability company, because it gives them the chance to check the box or float through in terms of their tax reporting. So I think this is something important. This is also an important consideration when you're thinking about incorporating or holding under your personal name. How is your investment in Costa Rica? If you're a foreign investor, how is your investment in Costa Rica going to affect your tax reporting and your tax compliance in your home country? You want to make sure that you're not paying double taxes or missing something there. So I think it's very important that you work with a local accountant from your home country if you're a foreign investor.
Paola, we have some questions here from the audience.
Yes, of course. Let me see.
Edgar's asking, could public registry be accessed online, or does one need to go in person?
You can access it online. You need to create a username and a password, but if you have an email, basically anybody that has an email can create a password, access it online. It's pretty self-conducive, I would say, like it's easy to use by yourself. You would see it's divided by sections, so you can go to the property section or the vehicle section, and you may check if there are any property. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's the Registro Nacional. You can go in there and it's like consultas gratuita, and there you can take a look. Krista Salah says here, just so that I'm clear, if you purchase a property under a company, does that exclude you as an individual to participate in the programs to obtain citizenship by investment? I think it's residence first and then become citizenship, but how's that working at the moment?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. It doesn't mean holding a property under a corporation does not exclude you from opting for residence as an investor. It just makes the process a little bit more complicated. So we had a change in the regulation. Before, you could just evidence to immigration authorities that you were owner of a share that has a property, and they would take that as your investment. Now it's a little bit more complicated. We need to work with accountants to make sure that your investment is capitalized in the shares of any company that that holds a property. So it's not that it excludes you, but it just makes the process a little bit difficult. So I would say if you're initially considering just buying a property to live here in Costa Rica and it's for family purposes or maybe for rental, but it's kind of an easy structure, maybe it makes sense if you want to apply for residency, so you don't have ongoing like high costs of applying for your residency. But in summary, no, it doesn't exclude you. It just makes the process a little bit more complicated.
Camille asks here, can the SA be owned by a company in the EU?
Yes, both SAs and SRLs may be owned by a company in the EU or in any other, any other foreign company. We don't have any restrictions for holding shares. Again, who will own your company, I guess, depends on your needs. And we always have this conversation with our clients. Has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but it depends on if you have a holding company abroad, if you have a trust, state, or some form of planning vehicle abroad, that's also important, or personal ownership. So yeah, anybody, either physical or legal person, foreign, can own shares in both of these corporations, these companies. Sorry.
Cool. Well, let's continue with the presentation here.
Okay, so how do real estate transaction works? And I think I'm gonna speed up this part a little bit because it's I know we don't have a lot of time, but in general terms, the first step is always, if somebody finds a property that they like, make sure you start negotiating with the seller. Typically, it's done through an agent or somebody that is helping you with your investment. But the important of a letter of intent or offer letter is to secure the price and general terms and conditions as quickly as possible, especially in hot markets. The next would be the signature of a purchase agreement, which basically gives you the terms and conditions of how your purchase will come along. For example, if you need to put your deposit, typically sales here of purchases of properties require, or purchases of property require a deposit, an initial deposit to show or evidence the seller that you have real intentions of buying. Typically it's refundable, but that's something that is important. So include all of the conditions there. Then this is always something that we do, I would like to say, nowadays, I would like to say in all of our transactions, to be honest. We work with an escrow agreement, with an escrow company. We sign an escrow agreement. This is important, so they hold the funds for the transaction, so we do it first. So we make sure that we are able to undergo due diligence of the property. And then second, to make sure that the seller will actually receive the price at the time of executing the purchase agreement. So having an escrow agreement, an escrow company, and choosing a good escrow company to work with is important because we have anti-money laundering regulations, and we can discuss that in another webinar. But the due diligence period is very important also, to make sure that you're reviewing the conditions of the property that you're purchasing, if it is suitable for the type of investment that you want to do. So not all properties are equal, and not all investments are equal. And this is also very important because we don't have title insurance in Costa Rica. So we want to make sure that we undergo through this process, communicate the due diligence result, and then finally the closing, which is the signature of the transferring deeds. I think the next slide is, I just wanted to give you a brief overview. We always have this question, how expensive it is to buy a property in Costa Rica or invest in Costa Rica, who pays for these costs? This is how it's typically done, but everything, well, some are mandatory, like capital gains tax. But sometimes like real estate commissions or closing expenses can be shared between the seller and the buyer. This is how it typically goes. But I think from a seller perspective, you always have to consider capital gain tax after every time you sell a property, and the real estate commission. And from the buyer's perspective, the closing expenses, which is like, I would say somewhere around 4% plus another fees for due diligence. And then consider ongoing costs of having property taxes. I think Richard mentioned home luxury taxes at some point during the webinar. So I think I can answer questions about that if we have, and I know we have only 4 minutes, so I don't know if we want to.
We can go a little bit longer if everyone doesn't
Okay,
want.
okay.
Want
Well,
to.
if everybody's available. These are the most frequently asked questions we get from our clients. It's interesting because these are frequent, like, should I incorporate? It's something that we get from our clients even if they are local investors or foreign investors, right? I think the main question from foreign investors is it safe to purchase here or to invest in Costa Rica? And I think my answer is always yes, if you are working with the right people. Do I need an attorney? Yes, because you need to undergo through due diligence. But what is more important is you need a public notary to record any transaction that you're doing over titled land, which is something that you must always consider. Can you transfer frauds from abroad? Yes. We do that through the escrow agents. I would say pretty simple, but it's important to know that you do have to evidence the source of your funds. Where are they coming from in order to comply with money laundering? If the money is coming into Costa Rica, not all transactions require money coming into Costa Rica. And then, do I have to be in Costa Rica to execute a purchase of a property? No. You can do it through a corporation if you incorporate one, or you can do it through a special power of attorney that requires certain formalities, but you don't have to be physically present. It's ideal. Of course, you want to know what you're investing in, but if for some reason you cannot be present in closing, it always can be arranged. And then I think this was a question that somebody also made in the Q&A, and I don't know if you want to complement, because I'm sure you'll have a little bit more data regarding this. I would say, yes, you can finance your investment in Costa Rica. There are, before there were more restrictions. I think now we're starting to see more of this. I would say also a lot of movement from private lenders, which are looking to place their investor money in this against a mortgage, for example. Local banks are supposedly getting into the market, but they have so many compliance requirements and in general, like requirements in general, that I would say local banks are usually not the best option to go. It takes time. If you're looking in a hot market, it doesn't have enough time to secure the financing before the purchase. So what I always tell my clients is, if you will depend on financing for your investment in Costa Rica, make sure you get ahead of the curve and start looking into this as soon as you're looking into properties, because it might take even longer to secure the financing than to purchase. And I don't know if you wanted to add something regarding that, because I know it's a question that people had in the chat.
Yeah, typically, if we do a closing where financing is involved with a Costa Rican bank, usually we're going to be putting 60-day closing or 90. We can put due diligence in 30 days just so that, they're aware. But it's always risky, just because there could be a chance that you don't get it. And, if you've gone past the due diligence date, your deposit goes hard. So you just need to structure it very, very carefully. I mean, we're always very protective over our clients who end up working with us, and just make sure that it's structured that at any moment they're not losing any money. But I think that the thing to bear in mind here is when you start looking at, basically your returns, you also have to look at the interest rate that you're paying as well, which can be from banks from like 9.5%. all the way up to private investors doing it 18, 20, and the numbers they don't start to make sense there, when in North America, you can get, rates at 5-6%. I mean, I know those numbers have been going up, but, it's sometimes I always say to clients, look, if you have a property in the US and you can take a HELOC loan out from 10 to 15 years at a low interest rate, and I say low compared to 9 to 20%, it makes financially more sense to do that than do it with a bank down here in Costa Rica. So. Cool. What a great summary there, Paola. Thank you. We've got some QA. We've got some QA here. How long is the lease good for beachfront property? So for concessions here, how long is the lease for?
Yeah, we've seen different types of terms. The lease period is usually 20 years. Yeah, 20 years, I would say, is the lease period. I've seen some, I mean, before they were granted for more years, but I think right now we're seeing lease period for 20 years.
Okay. And if I'm correct, I mean, there's also, we have titled beachfront as well. There's just to confuse stuff a little bit more, but there's not that much of it.
Yeah, I think there are two exceptions to this rule of the 200 meters, which is titled properties that were properties that were titled when the law entered into effect. There was like a transition period. So there are some beachfront properties that are titled. They're not very easy to get your hands on because they're scarce, but there are some, yeah. There's also, I think we talked about Jaco. I don't think we talked about Punta Arenas, but these are city ports, which are also, you may purchase titled property there that is beachfront, that is not subject to the maritime zone regulations, yeah.
Aldos here says, does Costa Rica publish company financials for SAs or SRLs? If so, when is that data published?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure I'm understanding that question very well.
I can answer this one. No, the financials for companies are not, because they're private companies and not basically companies. So they're not like, as we have in the UK, PLCs, public limited companies. They're limited, private limited companies.
Yes, no, accounting and movement, like internal finances of corporations are private.
Yeah. Steve says here, what is the typical loan to value in commercial properties? Steve, to be honest with you, I don't think banks like to loan on commercial properties if you're not a resident here in Costa Rica. So it's very difficult to do that. I mean, I would say if you're coming from the US wanting to do commercial, you have to find a way to structure it as residential. And then if you want to do commercial, that's up to you. But the bank is not going to touch commercial stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I would say to add to that, sorry, I would say that private lenders also typically, I would say like high loan to value opportunities. So I guess commercial loans require higher, I don't know, higher evidence of their worth.
Yeah, I mean, typical stuff is going to be about 60% loan to value that they're doing, 50, 60% loan to value. Johnny says here, is it better to have a will or trust once the transaction is complete, taking in mind lawyers' fees and taxes?
I think I don't want to be this like a repetitive. I think this always is on a case-by-case basis. You could say a will is easier to execute here in Costa Rica for your investments. You know, it's pretty straightforward. It's done through a public notary. It's very regulated. It's registered in the National Archive. But some people, depending on the structure that you decide or that you're using to holding your corporation, you might want to use a trust, depending on the requirements or the conditions of the, you know, how you're going to distribute your assets or how you want your assets to distribute. If you want to, you know, give some restrictions or limitations, a trust is probably a better option. But again, this is, I think, in terms of costs, I would say a will is a little bit less expensive than trust, because you also have to pay like maintenance fees for trust. So,
okay. Edgar says, what happens after the 20 years with a concession? Can it be renewed?
Yes, concessions can be renewed. They can be renewed.
When would they not be renewed, Paola? Because I think that's a lot of the fear that people have. Like, okay, and I think people just need to understand the majority of luxury beachfront hotels here are in concessions. So, like, it's not normal. But I mean, at the end of the 20 years, like, does it automatically get renewed? Do they ever get canceled?
It's not automatic. I think to answer this question, and I don't, this is like maritime zone regulations and concessions, I think are a good webinar subject because they give a lot of materials. Things that I think are important is a concession is not something that you just go and request and say, I want this, give me this concession. You have to go through a process and you know, apply for the concession, have development programs that evidence what you're going to do there, and make sure you're upkeeping with this, that you're also paying your, you know, concession fees up to date. So if you have if you plan to do an investment in a concession and you're authorized a concession, you present all of your development plans and everything, and you leave your concession there and you don't do anything with it, I think there could be a possibility that it's not renewed, right? Because you're not using it correctly. But if you're giving it the correct use, if you're complying with the constructions there, with the permits, obtaining the permits, paying your canon, and all of the paying your dues, I think it's renewable and you're subject to renew. It's not automatic, and it has to be applied, I think, at least 6 months in advance before it expires. So it's important when you have a concession to be moving your file, to making sure that everything is up to date and upkept.
I think the thing that people need to understand is the municipalities want you to have an active concession because then they can get the taxes, the canons. So like, it's not they want to cancel it at all. Like, you just need to kind of just work within the framework of the zoning that you have on it.
Exactly. And if done correctly, concessions are a safe investment as well. Yeah.
Peter here asks about, what about permisos de usos against concessions? Like, I mean, that's a rabbit hole I think we could go down. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I actually think this could be a very interesting topic for a webinar. So concessions require municipalities, in order to obtain a concession, municipalities have to have a zoning plan in place. Not all municipalities of Costa Rica have zoning plans in place. So permisos de uso are kind of like a figure that municipalities have come up, have authorized. And again, this will depend on each municipality. You need to really check the regulations. So I'm like maybe giving out too much information because this is very specific. But permiso de uso will allow you to, you have connect services and build some structures, but it's not as safe as a concession. It's not registered, it's not approved, it's just a permit that you get. It's like a precarious permit that you get to live in your property.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the lifetime of it can be different. I mean, I was looking at one in Evita the other day that was every year, and I was like, wait, that's really scary, because like every year you have to apply for the permiso de uso because it was in OSA. And I just was like, that's way too much risk.
Yeah.
So Camille says here, how do you normally work? Do you take care of the whole process? Can you participate partly? How long does it take to build a bungalow, más o menos? Well, Camille, I think how we work, again, we'll email you after this. You're more than happy to kind of meet with us and chat with us. But yeah, we do take care of the whole process for you. And also, how long does it take to build a bungalow? Wow. Depending on the size of it, Camille, I mean, it can take anywhere from, for the whole permitting design phase, let's say 12 months up to 18 months, depending on the size of it and how complicated it is. Chris asks here, how long are monies held in escrow? Are they held in colones or are they held in dollars? And so that they don't have that currency risk.
Yeah, the money is held in escrow for the duration of the transaction. I would say the first portion of the money is held in escrow. I would say typically 7 to 10 days after you execute the offer letter or a purchase agreement, and it will stay there until closing. So how long it will be will depend on what, your due diligence period mainly. If you set a short due diligence period, like 30 days, then you need probably a week or so for closing. Some people need a little bit more, again, depending on if you have financing. I would say average 30 to 60 days, maybe, Richard. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think
probably around about 30 days. I mean, look, it's 10% held as an escrow, and then usually a couple of weeks later, probably I would say, usually we have due diligence here be about 30 days, and then closing kind of usually a week after that, just so we can prep. So that remaining 90% literally goes into the account, and then you close a couple of days later. So it's not 100% of the funds in.
Yeah, the purchase price is held only for 2 days, unless the purchase is delayed for some reason, but it's not very typical. Usually the funds arrive 1 or 2 days before closing.
Yep. Camille says here, how busy are you now? How long is the waiting line to build? Many thanks for this webinar. I say, Camille, always busy, but just again, reach out to us after if you want to the podcast. We're more than happy to chat with you. Edgar asks, which banks are easier to transfer escrow deposit? Is it big banks, Chase, Bank of America, Amex, etc.? You want to answer that one, or you want me to do that one, Paola?
Well, I don't think maybe you want to answer it, because from my perspective, I don't see a lot of difference, but maybe you have more experience in that. I think the escrow company is more important.
Yeah, the escrow company is. And I mean, look, there is escrow companies like TLA up in Texas, which is very easy to use, meaning that sometimes for US buyers or Canadian buyers, it's easier. And especially if the seller doesn't want the funds doesn't need the funds to come down to Costa Rica and just stay within the US ecosystem. But if it's coming here again to Costa Rica, it doesn't make any difference of which bank it's used.
we're on the same page.
Cool. Daniel, I don't know whether you still have your hands up there. You had your hands up. If you I'll allow you to talk here, Daniel, and ask your question. If not, if you did have a question, if not, don't worry. Okay.
I don't know. I think there was a question about opportunity for commercial real estate investments. Maybe I saw that one, but I don't know if we covered it.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity. Like, again, I love this Costa Rican saying, "Hay plata en el calle." There's money in the street, guys. This is a developing currency where country where there is a lot of opportunity all over the place. You know, it's more money is flowing in here. You saw the data there. For every $1 GDP, 13 dollars are flying in through the door from investment here. So yeah. Daniel, you have I think you had your hand up there. Did you want to say anything? Okay,
maybe they did it.
It was earlier on. Matty has a question here, so I'm going to allow him to talk.
Good afternoon or good evening. My question was that how easy it is to open a bank account for a corporation in Costa Rica?
I've had success recently, Paola, with public banks.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I'm now working more. Before I used to recommend private banks, and now I'm working more with public banks, even sometimes without an appointment. You take the requirements and you go. If it's a recently formed corporation, it's pretty, I would say now pretty simple. This used to be a big how do you call this? A stone in your foot? Is that a word? Stone in your shoe?
Stone in your shoe, yeah.
But I think banks are interested in getting more clients. They know we have a lot of foreign investment coming into the country, so I think they're flexibilizing. For me, maybe now the opening of the bank account is not such a big hassle, as in how much money or how, what are you going to be transferring into the country? That's where I think you have the hassle. So opening a bank account for paying services like water, electricity, utilities, employees, fees, like day-to-day activities, I think it's pretty simple. Then if you want to make international transactions over certain amounts, that's where it starts to maybe get a little bit more complicated. But
yeah, just to kind of reinforce that, it's exactly. I mean, Banco Costa Rica, Banco Nacional have been very easy for a lot of our clients to open up accounts. The private ones are actually a little bit more of a pain in the butt. The public ones are a lot easier. I mean, you do, if you're going to open up with a corporation, have to have cash flow and get an accountant involved to kind of produce that stuff, and also a lawyer. You know, it will probably end up costing a couple of $100, but I think it's worth it to have the corporation. As Paola says there, once the funds get sent in, the bank is going to want a lot of documents knowing of where did that funds come from, potentially tax returns. You know, it's going to want sometimes bank reference letters, copies of your IDs. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this is something, if you are planning on having an operative corporation or company, it's a good idea to do it at the beginning, you know, opening it as soon as you set up the corporation, and that way you can, you know, with a cash flow, and you can avoid not having to do all of this.
Cool. Edgar's actually here. Could you provide the link to the online registry? Yeah, I'm more than happy to here. Basically, it looks like this when you go to it, and then you can just sign in here. I'm right in saying this, right, Paola? For the online registry.
Yes.
And then you can go to consultas gratuitas here, and then basically here you can, for names, planos, all that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of different stuff in here. So, but I will type the answer here for you anyway. Let me just grab this for you for the National Registry here, Edgar, and everyone can have a copy of it. Any other questions, guys, before we say goodbye? I don't think anything more chats coming on here. I think we've answered everyone's questions. I'll just wait 30 seconds here, and if nothing else comes up, we'll, as my grandmother would say, love you and leave you. So, yeah. Okay, I don't think, well, Max is coming here with a question. Let's allow Max to talk.
Hi, guys. Hey, Richard, was that Jeff Sorensen that you mentioned from Hawaii?
No, it's Jeff Brazola, Max.
Oh, okay, different Jeff. Yeah, I know a Jeff that does vacation rentals in Hawaii.
No, I
don't know if he's been to Costa Rica.
No, this was many years ago. I think he sold his company probably about 10 years ago too. One of the big guys. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be in touch. I'd like to chat offline here.
Oh, fantastic. We always love to chat investing.
All right. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much, Max. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, guys. Actually, wait, sorry, QA here. 2 came in. Dave said that was an outstanding, objective, informative presentation. You're very welcome. Maria said, gracias. Excellent webinar. Both of you are really clear. Thank you. I know it was a lot of information in a very short period of time here, guys. Again, we'll send out the copy of the webinar that we have here as well, just so that you guys have a copy of it. This is also recorded, so we'll put it online. But anything you guys need in the future, we're more than happy to help out. And Edgar says, where can we learn more about you, Richard and Paola? I mean, you can go to LinkedIn, we're both there, but also you can just reach out to us. Our contact details will be in the email after here as well, guys, for anything that you need. Okay.
Yes, and feel free to reach out. It was a pleasure.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you so much, Richard.
See you later.
As well. Bye.